Monsters University, we give our heart to you.
Monsters University. When it comes to the first film, Monsters, Inc., I find it to be a little overrated. One of the biggest reasons why I say that is because of Boo. The movie would use her as a novelty of, oh look how cute this little girl is, rather than being an actual character. It just makes me want her to shut up and mail her to Abu Dhabi. It's like it's getting the audience's affection more for the wrong reasons. But don't get me wrong though, despite that, it's still a good film and I do enjoy it, but I don't think it's Pixar's best work. But now that Boo's out of the picture, will this film get a good grade from me? Or should it have studied a bit more before getting ready? Let's find out. The story. The movie really stands out when it comes to have a 3-act structure. Each act tells an entire story of its own. The first act is when Mike enters MU and is doing well at school while competing against Sully, the popular kid of the class who gets bad grades. The second act is the competition of the scare games, where Mike and Sully have to be on the same team with some rejects in Uzma Kappa. And the third act, well, I won't say anything about it since major spoilers are involved. The first 2 acts aren't really that strong, and at times, you know what will happen in the end. Plus the fact that they've reminded me of several films that have a similar plotline, like the first act would remind me a bit of something like Billy Madison, while the second act would make me think a lot of something like Happy Gilmore. It isn't until the third act when things really pick up and it gets to that level of Pixar quality when the plot would get both interesting and creative. But I'm not saying that the other 2 acts are bad. While the first one is told decently, there are times when the second one can get engaging as you would root for Mike and Sully's team. It's not the best story that Pixar can think of, but you can't really say that it's bad. The animation. If I have to narrow down the movie's strongest aspect, it's that Monsters University is a great example of how Pixar has evolved with their animation over the years, from their beginnings with Monsters Inc., where their biggest challenge was Sully's fur, to now with MU, where they deal with every texture imaginable. Not just fur, but also skin, scales, hard shells, feathers, hair, horns, leaves, wood, metal, you name it, it's in there and it looks great. It shows how they are capable to take anything you can think of and able to recreate it in the computer down to the smallest detail. Another thing that stands out about this film is the character design. They did a pretty good job interpreting younger versions of the characters we've known to love, like Mike, Sully, and Randall, by making them look smaller with bigger eyes than how they were in the previous film. As for the other characters, they kept the tradition of the first film of monsters if they were designed by children, which is a smart idea for the theme of the movie, but there might be too many characters in MU. Don't get me wrong, each character looks very unique and creative, and they do make the movie look very colorful, but because that there are so many, some characters start to look more like aliens more than monsters. But what is great with all these different characters is that it really does complement the character animation, giving the animators an endless supply of things to work with. It really stands out in the second act during the scare games. The only thing I'm not satisfied with the animation is that the setting doesn't feel like anything new. With the past and even future Pixar films, we would go to new places where we've never been before, like life in a view of a toy or a bug, outer space, in the air, and even more. Here, we're in a university, and despite that it's for monsters and it does have nice architecture, I feel like I've already been there. I don't know, maybe that's just me, since I am a college student and I'm used to looking at settings like that. But Pixar still did a fantastic job with the animation nonetheless. The characters. Like I mentioned before, there are a lot of characters in this movie. But when it comes down to who's important and who we need to focus on, it's pretty simple. Let's start off with Mike, who is a more serious character than in the first film, being a smart aleck who always studies despite everyone around him saying that he's not scary. He is well built and well written as a character by being strong either on his own or by leading the Uzma Kappa team. There's Sully, who's best described as the popular jerk who thinks he's the best and rather wants to party than study. It just makes him unlikable and pretty hard to feel for him, even when the movie's trying to. It also makes it pretty hard to care much for the relationship between Mike and Sully, since obviously one's not even trying to make us care. It's not until the second half of the movie where both the relationship and Sully tends to pick up, and we start to feel for both. Then there's Dean Hardscrabble, who's more the antagonist of the first act. She's not fully evil, but she has an approach that's similar to Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, where she's menacing but in a calm approach, and we always see her in the shadows, but we know she's there. For the Scare Games team, the only important ones are Uzma Kappa and Roar Omega Roar. The ROR team are the antagonists of the second act, but not as good as Hardscrabble since they are just the popular jocks and we don't focus on them a lot. In Team Uzma Kappa, which features Art, Dawn, Terry and Squishy, are more the comedy reliefs of the movie, being the nerdy rejects of MU. Even though they're not that funny, it takes a lot of time for them to be likable. Also, I won't say a lot about this, but you can expect some great cameos and they fit in the movie perfectly when they come in. However, there's one character that's just a major lost opportunity for this movie, and that's Randall. In the beginning, he's shown as Mike's new buddy, and after a while, the film would forget about him instantly. It would have been really interesting to see like a subplot of how he started from being Mike's friend to Sully's biggest rival, but all they did with him is just pop up in a few scenes with little to no involvement with the plot. It's hard to care for the characters at first, but they would eventually get memorable by time. Monsters University is not the most memorable, nor is it one of the best Pixar films. But it's okay with some nice and colorful animation, but a story and characters that take a lot of time to get into. If you love Monsters Inc., then you'll probably like MU as well. If not, or you haven't seen the first movie, then it's best to wait for the DVD. I will say that it does succeed as a prequel to Monsters Inc. Despite Randall's involvement with MU, everything seems to fit together and answers a lot of questions we would have from the first one, even the small ones. But don't expect it to be like Toy Story 3, where it was made especially for those who grew up with the first film.